Have you ever felt small when someone mistreated you? Have you ever lost sleep thinking about that person who humiliated you in front of others? Have you ever found yourself ruminating for days on end about those cutting words someone said to you? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone. And most importantly, you do not have to continue being held hostage by the toxic attitudes of others. Today, I'm going to unlock ancient codes in your mind. Codes that transformed slaves into great philosophers, that strengthened Roman emperors in their darkest moments, and that can literally revolutionize the way you deal with disrespect. By the end of this video, you will no longer be the same person who clicked play. Over 2,000 years ago, extraordinary men faced the worst humiliations imaginable. Epictetus was a slave for decades, suffering daily physical and psychological abuse. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while being constantly betrayed and disrespected by those he trusted most. Seneca had his life threatened multiple times by a cruel and unstable emperor. And do you know what they all had in common? They discovered something most people never will: how to turn the disrespect of others into fuel for their own greatness. These men didn't just survive, they thrived. And they left us with a comprehensive manual on how to do the same. Today, you're going to learn 5 Stoic techniques that will completely rewire your relationship with disrespect. I'm not talking about abstract philosophy or fancy theories. I'm talking about practical tools, tested over 20 centuries, that work in the real world. In the next few minutes, you will discover how to question the toxic narratives that your mind automatically creates when someone disrespects you. You will learn how to establish unbreakable boundaries without losing your serenity. You will master the art of seeing situations from the perspective of someone observing from above, far from the emotional chaos. You will discover how to transform every instance of disrespect into an opportunity for growth. And you will understand why other people's opinions of you are, in fact, completely irrelevant to your happiness. If you are ready to step out of the victim position and take full control over your emotional reactions, then hit the like button now and let's begin this journey of transformation together. The first code that needs to be unlocked in your mind is related to something that happens in milliseconds, but that determines hours, days, sometimes years of suffering. When someone disrespects you, your mind is not just recording the facts. It is creating a complete story, full of interpretations, meanings, and conclusions that may be completely wrong. Epictetus, who knew disrespect like few others, after all, he spent decades being literally owned by another human being, discovered something revolutionary: it is not facts that trouble men, but judgments about facts. This means that it is not what happens to you that hurts you, but what you decide it means. Think about the last time someone disrespected you. Maybe a coworker interrupted you in a meeting. Maybe a family member made a harsh comment about your choices. Maybe someone ignored you when you greeted them. Now be brutally honest: how much of your pain came from the bare facts, and how much came from the stories you created around those facts? When your coworker interrupted you, you didn't just think, "He interrupted me." Your mind instantly created a narrative: "He doesn't respect me. He thinks I'm incompetent. Everyone in the room must think I'm an idiot. My career is ruined." And it was that narrative, not the interruption itself, that made you suffer. The Stoics call these impressions. These are the automatic judgments, the instantaneous interpretations that our minds make about events. And here's the first code: you don't have to accept these impressions as truth. You can question each one of them before giving your consent. The discipline of assent is exactly that, the process of examining each impression before accepting it as real. It's like having a mental security system that filters out toxic thoughts before they take hold in your mind. I'm going to teach you an exercise that will change your life. It's called the 10-second technique. The next time someone disrespects you, before you react, count to 10. But don't just count the numbers. During those 10 seconds, ask yourself 3 fundamental questions. First question: is this really true? When your mind says, "He hates me," ask yourself, how can I be absolutely sure that he hates me? Maybe he's having a bad day. Maybe he didn't even realize the tone he used. Maybe he's going through some personal issues. The truth is, you can't know for sure what's going on in his mind. Second question: How can I be sure of this? If your mind insists that you are sure, challenge that certainty. What concrete evidence do you have? How many times have you misinterpreted someone's intentions? How many times have you discovered later that you were completely wrong about what someone was thinking? Third question, is there an alternative interpretation? This is the most powerful question. There always is. Always. Maybe the person is stressed. Maybe they didn't even realize how they sounded. Maybe they're imitating a behavior they learned as a child. Maybe they even agree with you, but they don't know how to express it appropriately. But the real transformation happens when you implement the second exercise, the impressions journal. Every night before you go to sleep, write down 3 situations in which you felt disrespected during the day. For each situation, write down the pure facts, without interpretation, the automatic interpretation that your mind made, and at least 2 possible alternative interpretations. For example, fact, Mary didn't return my greeting. Automatic interpretation, she's ignoring me because she's mad at me. Alternative interpretations, she was distracted thinking about something important, she didn't see me, she was in a hurry, she didn't hear me. After a few weeks of doing this, you'll start to notice patterns. You'll discover that your mind has specific biases of interpretation that make it always choose the most painful version of events. The amazing thing is that, over time, this process becomes automatic. You develop what the Stoics called an investigative mind. Instead of blindly accepting any interpretation that comes your way, you automatically question, investigate, and seek alternatives. And then something magical happens. Most of the situations that once hurt you deeply simply stop affecting you. Because you realize you are suffering from stories, not facts. And when you stop feeding toxic stories, they simply starve to death. But mastering your mind is only the first step. Because no matter how much you control your interpretations, some people will still cross your boundaries. And that's where our next tool comes in, the art of setting unbreakable boundaries without losing your inner peace. There's a toxic belief that our society has implanted in our minds, the idea that setting boundaries is being aggressive, selfish, or insensitive. This belief keeps millions of people trapped in destructive relationships, toxic jobs, and suffocating family dynamics. But the Stoics had a completely different take on this. For them, setting boundaries wasn't aggression, it was wisdom. It wasn't selfishness, it was self-respect. And it wasn't insensitivity, it was, in fact, the most compassionate act you can do, both for yourself and for the other person. Because when you don't have clear boundaries, you become resentful. And a resentful person cannot truly love. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world at the time, was constantly faced with people who tried to manipulate him, use him, and disrespect him. Corrupt senators, treacherous generals, self-interested family members. He could have reacted with anger, he could have used his power to destroy these people. But he chose something much more powerful, to set crystal clear boundaries with absolute serenity. The second code that needs to be unlocked in your mind is this: your boundaries are not suggestions. They are unbreakable laws of your existence. And when you communicate them calmly and clearly, you are not being aggressive, you are being respectful of yourself and others. There are 4 types of boundaries you need to master. The first is physical boundaries, your personal space, your possessions, your body. If someone invades your space without permission, you have the right, and the duty, to communicate that clearly. I need you to respect my personal space is not aggression, it's politeness. The second is emotional boundaries. You are not obligated to accept yelling, insults, emotional manipulation, or blackmail. I will not continue this conversation while you are yelling is not abandonment, it is self-respect. The third is your time limits, your schedule, your energy, your availability. I can't help you with that right now isn't selfish, it's healthy resource management. The fourth is your value boundaries, your principles, your beliefs, your integrity. I can't participate in something that goes against my values is not inflexibility, it's authenticity. But here's the secret that most people never discover: how you communicate your boundaries is just as important as the boundaries themselves. And the Stoics developed a virtually foolproof formula for doing just that. This is the "I understand, however, therefore" technique. I understand that you are frustrated with the situation, however, I will not accept you yelling at me, so I will withdraw until we can talk calmly. This formula acknowledges the other person's feelings, states your boundary clearly, and explains the consequence in a non-punitive way. I will give you practical examples of how to apply this. At work, I understand that this project is urgent, however, I cannot work beyond 6 p.m. today because I have family commitments, so I will prioritize the most important tasks until then. In family, I understand that you care about me, however, I will no longer discuss my personal choices, so I will change the subject whenever it is brought up. In relationships, I understand that you're upset, however, I won't accept being treated with disrespect, so I'm going to leave the house for a few hours so we can both cool off. The power of this formula lies in 3 elements. It is non-offensive, you are not justifying yourself, it is non-aggressive, you are not attacking, and it is non-negotiable, you are communicating a decision, not making a request. But here comes the hard part, people will test your boundaries. They will push, they will question, they will try to make you feel guilty for setting them. And that's when most people give up and fall back into the uncomfortable zone of disrespect. The Stoics had a specific technique for this, the broken record technique. When someone tries to cross your line, you simply repeat, calmly and firmly, the same line, as many times as necessary. Without explaining yourself, without justifying yourself, without losing your temper. I'm not going to argue with that. But you need to understand that. I'm not going to argue with that. You're being irrational. I'm not going to argue with that. It seems simple, but it requires extraordinary inner strength. Because our natural tendency is to want to explain, convince, justify. But the Stoics knew that limits are not arguments to be debated, they are realities to be respected. And here's something that may seem paradoxical, the calmer you are when setting boundaries, the more people are likely to respect them. When you yell or defend yourself, you convey insecurity. When you communicate with unshakable calm, you convey natural authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not over external events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Your limits are part of your power over your own mind. They define where you end and where the external world begins. But setting boundaries is only half the equation. The other half is developing the perspective needed to not be shaken when someone tests them. And that brings us to the next code that needs to be unlocked, the ability to see any situation from the perspective of someone looking up. Imagine you are watching a movie about your own life. You see this person on the screen, that is you being disrespected by someone. You observe how they react, how they feel, how that situation affects them. Now tell me, from this perspective as an observer, does that situation seem as catastrophic as it did when you were living it from the inside? This shift in perspective isn't just a mental exercise, it's one of the most powerful tools the Stoics ever developed. They called it anabasin, the vision from above. And when you master this technique, something extraordinary happens. You develop the ability to rise above the emotional drama of any situation. Marcus Aurelius used this technique often. In his meditations, he writes about imagining himself looking down on Rome, seeing all the turmoil, all the conflicts, all the political intrigues as tiny ants. Not out of contempt, but out of perspective. When you see things from afar, you see their true proportions. The third code that needs to be unlocked in your mind is this: emotional proximity distorts everything. When you are too close to a situation, it takes up your entire field of vision. It seems gigantic, inescapable, life-defining. But when you learn to mentally distance yourself, the situation shrinks back to its true size. Think about an argument you had 5 years ago. Something that at the time seemed extremely important, that kept you up at night, that you thought would change everything in your life. Now, 5 years later, does that situation still seem so important? You probably don't even remember the details. And if you do, you probably even smile at the emotional intensity that you put into it. This doesn't mean you were wrong to feel affected at the time. It just means your perspective was limited by emotional proximity. And the good news is that you can develop that 5-year in the future perspective right now, in the present, in the midst of the situation. I will teach you 3 practical exercises to develop the vision from above. The first is the 10-year zoom out. Every time someone disrespects you and you feel that wave of anger or sadness rising, ask yourself this question: 10 years from now, looking back, will this situation matter? Be honest. The answer, more often than not, will be no. And if it is no, why are you giving them the power to steal your peace today? But what if the answer is yes? What if it's something really important? Then ask yourself the second question: 10 years from now, how would I like to remember how I handled this situation? Do you want to remember yourself as someone who lost control, who reacted impulsively, who allowed yourself to be debased to the point of disrespect? Or do you want to remember yourself as someone who maintained dignity, who responded wisely, who grew through adversity? The second exercise is the neutral observer perspective. Imagine that you are an anthropologist from another planet, studying human behavior. You observe this situation of disrespect as an interesting phenomenon, without emotional judgment. How would you describe what is happening? Human A made sounds that human B interpreted as threatening. Human B responded with physiological changes, increased heart rate, muscle tension, release of cortisol. From this scientific perspective, the situation loses all dramatic charge and becomes simply human behavior. The third exercise is cosmic vision. This is the most advanced, but also the most transformative. When you feel truly disturbed by some disrespect, close your eyes and imagine that you are moving away from Earth. First, you see your city from above. Then, your country. Then, the continent. Until you are in space, seeing our blue planet floating in the infinite void. From here, you can see that there are billions of people living their lives, facing their own challenges, dealing with their own conflicts. You can see that the person who disrespected you is just a tiny human being, on a tiny planet, in a tiny solar system, in a galaxy among billions of galaxies. This isn't to minimize your feelings or invalidate your experiences. It's to put them into perspective. It's to help you see that you can choose how big any situation in your life will be. Neuroscientists have discovered something fascinating about this practice. When you mentally change your perspective, your brain responds as if you had physically changed position. Activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and anger, significantly decreases. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and decision-making, becomes more active. In other words, the view from above is not just a nice philosophical technique. It literally changes your brain chemistry, taking you out of fight or flight mode and putting you into think and choose mode. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of this technique is how it reveals something most people never realize, that your emotional reactions are always a choice. When you're in the thick of it, it feels like you have no choice. It feels like anger, sadness, and indignation are inevitable, automatic responses. But when you step back and look from above, you see clearly that there is a moment, a tiny space, between the stimulus and your response. And in that space lies your freedom. Marcus Aurelius knew this. That's why he wrote, "See things as they really are, dividing them into matter, cause, and relation." When you apply the vision from above, you can separate the pure facts, matter, from your interpretations, cause, and the impact you allow them to have on your life, relation. The view from above gives you something few people have, the ability to be the director of the movie of your life, instead of just an actor reacting to the script that others write for you. But even with this elevated perspective, there's still a deeper code to be unlocked. Because it's not enough to just observe situations from above, you have to learn to turn them into fuel for your growth. And that's what we're going to discover now. Here's a truth that may sound strange at first, but it could completely change your life. The people who disrespect you the most can be your greatest teachers. Not because they deserve gratitude for their disrespect, but because they offer you something that no kind person can offer you, the opportunity to develop emotional muscles you never knew you needed. The Stoics had a revolutionary concept, impedimentum est via, the obstacle is the way. This means that you don't grow in spite of difficulties, but through them. And when you truly understand this, something extraordinary happens. You stop seeing disrespect as something that happens against you, and start seeing it as something that happens to you. Seneca, who had to deal with one of the most unstable and dangerous men in history, the Emperor Nero, developed a perspective that seemed almost impossible. He saw every humiliation, every threat, every risky situation as a training ground for his soul. Every new beginning comes from the end of some other beginning, he wrote. And every slight he faced was the end of a weaker version of himself and the beginning of a stronger one. The fourth code that needs to be unlocked in your mind is this: you are not a victim of circumstances, you are the sculptor of your own character. And every difficult situation is just another instrument in your hands to create the masterpiece you are destined to be. Think about the Stoics' four cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Now answer me honestly, how could you develop these virtues if you lived only among people who treated you with kindness and respect? How would you discover what you are truly capable of if you were never tested? Wisdom develops when you need to understand complex behaviors, hidden motivations, and challenging human dynamics. That person who disrespects you is forcing you to develop emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, and character discernment. Without it, you would remain naive. Courage manifests when you have to face uncomfortable situations, set difficult boundaries, and maintain your integrity under pressure. The person who challenges you is giving you opportunities to practice bravery that you would never have in a friendly environment. Justice is strengthened when you have to uphold your principles even when others do not uphold theirs. When you choose to act with integrity even in the face of others' lack of integrity, you develop a moral strength that becomes unshakable. Temperance deepens when you must control impulses to retaliate, to take revenge, to stoop to the level of disrespect. Each time you choose the high answer instead of the easy answer, you develop self-control that becomes second nature. I'm going to teach you an exercise that will completely transform your relationship with difficult people. It's called the Virtue Journal. Every night, identify a situation of disrespect that you faced during the day. Then, write down which virtue that situation allowed you to practice and how you can practice that virtue better next time. For example, today my boss interrupted me and disqualified my idea in front of the team. Virtue practiced: temperance, not retaliating impulsively. Growth: I realized that I still feel angry, but I managed not to express it. Next time, I will also practice wisdom, thinking of a constructive way to approach this later, in private. But the most powerful exercise is the one that may seem the strangest: the unsent gratitude letter. Choose someone who has consistently disrespected you. It could be a coworker, a family member, an ex-partner. Now write a letter thanking that person for the growth they have brought into your life. No, you are not sending that letter. And no, you are not justifying this person's behavior. You are acknowledging that regardless of their intentions, the result has been your empowerment. You are taking full responsibility for your growth. The letter might go something like this: thank you for teaching me that my inner peace does not depend on the approval of others. Thank you for forcing me to develop clearer boundaries. Thank you for showing me the kind of person I don't want to be. Thank you for giving me opportunities to practice patience, wisdom, and self-control. What happens when you write that letter is chemical. Literally. Studies show that gratitude releases serotonin and dopamine, the same neurotransmitters released by antidepressants. But more than that, it changes your internal narrative. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim, you see yourself as the protagonist of your own journey of growth. But I'll give you a warning: this exercise will feel artificial at first. Your mind will resist it. It will feel like you're being fake or fooling yourself. That's normal. Keep doing it anyway. Because you're not trying to change your feelings first, you're changing your actions. And when you consistently change your actions, your feelings eventually follow. The Stoics knew something that modern psychology is only just beginning to understand: that gratitude is not a feeling you expect to have, it's a practice you choose to do. And when you practice gratitude even in the face of adversity, you develop a strength that no external circumstance can touch. Marcus Aurelius, writing to himself in his Meditations, said, "A mind that is at peace transforms every place into a city of gold." When you learn to use disrespect as fuel for growth, your mind develops just such peace. Not a passive peace that needs ideal conditions to exist, but an active peace that transforms every situation into an opportunity. This is perhaps the most beautiful paradox of Stoicism. When you stop needing people to respect you in order to feel good about yourself, you naturally become more respectable. When you stop seeking external validation, you develop an inner confidence that is genuinely attractive. When you turn adversaries into teachers, you develop a wisdom that impresses even those who initially disrespected you. But there is one last code to unlock. One that will give you ultimate freedom, the understanding that other people's opinions of you are, in fact, completely irrelevant to your happiness and fulfillment. There is a prison that most people carry with them wherever they go. An invisible prison, but it is absolutely real. The bars of this prison are made of a substance stronger than steel, the need for approval from others. And the key to this prison lies in understanding a concept that may sound cold, but is actually profoundly liberating: preferable indifference. Epictetus, who knew literal prisons, after all, he spent decades chained as a slave, discovered something most free people never discover: that true freedom comes not from being physically free, but from being mentally free from the opinions of others. No man is free who is not master of himself, he said. And being master of yourself means understanding that the approval of others does not determine your worth. The fifth and final code that needs to be unlocked in your mind is this: you don't need anyone to respect you to have an extraordinary life. In fact, when you truly understand this, something magical happens: you naturally become more respectable. The Stoics divided everything in existence into three simple but revolutionary categories. First, what is genuinely good: the virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Second, what is genuinely bad: the vices, ignorance, cowardice, injustice, intemperance. And third, everything else, indifferent. This includes money, health, fame, and, yes, the opinion others have of you. This doesn't mean that these things don't matter at all. It means that they don't determine whether you have a good or bad life. They are preferential. It's natural to prefer being healthy over being sick, having money over being poor, being respected over being disrespected. But if you make your happiness conditional on these things, you're handing over control of your life to external factors. Think for a moment: how many decisions do you make based not on what's right for you, but on what others will think? How many times have you stopped following a dream because someone might judge you? How many times have you said yes when you meant no, just to please someone? How many times have you felt small because someone didn't show you the approval you expected? Each of these situations is a moment when you chose prison over freedom. And the irony is that the person who built that prison was you. I'm going to teach you an exercise that may be uncomfortable at first, but is absolutely transformative: the core values list. Take a piece of paper and write down the 5 most important values in your life. Not what you think you should value, not what others expect you to value, but what genuinely resonates with who you are deep down. These could be things like integrity, creativity, family, personal growth, contribution, adventure, inner peace. What matters is that they are authentically yours. Now, for the next week, at the end of each day, evaluate your day based on these values. Rate yourself from 1 to 10 on how well you lived each value that day. What you'll discover is eye-opening. On days when you live according to your core values, you feel good about yourself, regardless of what others think. On days when you betray those values to please others, you feel bad, even though you receive all the approval in the world. The second exercise is even more powerful: the invisibility test. Every time you have to make a decision, from what clothes to wear to what career to pursue, ask yourself this question: if I were invisible and no one would ever know about this decision, what would I choose? This question reveals your true desires, stripped of the need for approval. But the most transformative exercise is the one that will seem the hardest. Practice making choices that you know some people will judge, but that are aligned with your values. Start small. Maybe it's expressing a different opinion in a conversation. Maybe it's wearing something that makes you feel good, but isn't appropriate for your age or position. Maybe it's picking up a hobby that others consider a waste of time. Every time you make a choice based on your own values, rather than the approval of others, you strengthen the muscle of emotional independence. And something interesting happens: the more you stop seeking approval, the more approval you receive. Because authenticity is magnetic. But I'll give you a warning: When you start practicing indifference to other people's opinions, some people will get upset. They'll try to guilt trip you, they'll question your choices, they'll even try to sabotage you. This is because your freedom mirrors their imprisonment. Your authenticity highlights their inauthenticity. This is where indifference becomes a truly compassionate virtue. When you don't need others' approval, you can love them more purely. You can care about them without depending on them. You can offer support without expecting gratitude. You can be kind without being submissive. The difference between indifference and insensitivity is crucial. Insensitivity is not caring about people. Preferable indifference is caring about people without depending on their approval. It's the difference between closing your heart and opening your heart with healthy boundaries. Marcus Aurelius, who had literally millions of people depending on his approval, wrote, "How easy it is to repel and eliminate any disturbing or inappropriate impression, and immediately be in perfect calm." He knew that public opinion of his decisions did not determine the quality of those decisions. When you truly internalize this, you develop something that few people possess: genuine inner peace. Not the peace that depends on everything being perfect around you, but the peace that exists regardless of external circumstances. The peace of knowing that your worth is not in the opinion of others, but in the quality of your character. And then something beautiful happens: you stop attracting people who disrespect you. Because people who disrespect you are naturally attracted to people who seek validation. They feel like they have power over those people. But when you become truly indifferent to other people's approval, you become unattractive to toxic people and interesting to healthy people. Preferable indifference is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of your real life. It's when you stop living for the audience and start living for your values. It's when you stop being a character in someone else's story and become the protagonist of your own. And here we are, at the end of this journey of discovery. You have come this far, which means that something inside you has recognized the truth in these words. Something inside you is ready for the transformation that these techniques can bring. Let's review the 5 codes we've unlocked together. First, you've learned that it's not the facts that hurt you, but your interpretations of them. The discipline of assent has empowered you to question those interpretations before accepting them as truth. Second, you've discovered that setting boundaries isn't aggression, it's wisdom. And that you can communicate those boundaries with absolute firmness while maintaining total composure. Third, you've mastered the art of rising above emotional drama through the higher view, gaining perspective that turns mountains into molehills. Fourth, you've learned to use every slight as fuel to strengthen your character, turning adversaries into unwitting teachers. And fifth, you've discovered that your happiness doesn't depend on the approval of others. You can live an extraordinary life while being completely indifferent to the opinions of others. These aren't just techniques, they're keys to a freedom most people never experience. The freedom to be truly yourself, regardless of how others react. The freedom to make decisions based on your values, not your fears. The freedom to love people without depending on them. The freedom to face any challenge knowing that you have everything you need inside of you. But knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. Real transformation happens when you take these tools and use them in your daily life. So I want you to choose one of these techniques, just one, to focus on for the next week. Don't try to implement them all at once. Choose the one that resonates most with you and practice it every day. If you choose the discipline of assent, use the 10-second technique every time you feel disrespected. If you choose boundaries, practice the "I understand, however, therefore" formula in at least one situation. If you choose the view from above, use the 10-year zoom out on every conflict. If you choose growth through adversity, write in your virtue journal every night. If you choose preferable indifference, take the invisibility test on every major decision. Small, consistent changes create big transformations. You don't have to become a Stoic philosopher overnight. You just have to be 1% better today than you were yesterday. Now I have a question for you. Which of these techniques touched your heart the most? Which one do you feel you need most in your life right now? Leave a comment below. Your answer may help someone who is going through the same situation as you. If this video helped you in any way, if you feel it could help someone you know, hit the like button and share. Not for the channel, but for the people who need to hear these words. If you want to continue this journey of personal growth based on Stoic wisdom, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next content. Remember, you've come this far for a reason. There's something inside you that knows you're capable of so much more than you've shown. These techniques are just tools, the real power is within you. It always has been. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength has always been yours. Now you have the tools to access it. Go ahead. Transform your life. And remember, every person who disrespects you is just an opportunity in disguise for you to practice your greatness. You are ready for this. I believe in you. Until the next video, stay strong, stay wise, and stay free.